The day Nkem started working as a cleaner in the tall grey building in Lagos, nobody even noticed him walk through the glass doors. People rushed past him, carrying files, talking fast, and acting like the world would collapse if they slowed down. He held a small bucket in one hand and a mop in the other, and his heart beat with a quiet determination he didn't show on his face. He came from a small compound in Enugu where life taught him to move with courage even when nobody believed in him. Nkem spent his first week learning every corner of the building. He knew the way the reception smelled in the morning after they sprayed air freshener. He knew the voices of the people who came early and the ones who always arrived late but acted like they were the busiest in the whole company. He knew the sound of the security man, Chijube, dragging his chair across the floor whenever he wanted to gossip about office drama. To everyone else, Nkem was invisible, but he was watching, learning, studying. Not the way people study in schools, but the way someone studies life. Every morning, he cleaned the glass doors so well that even his reflection surprised him. He cleaned the stair rails, the floors, the elevators, and the restrooms. Some staff dropped wrapper papers on the floor after he cleaned, and he simply picked them up again without saying a word. They thought silence meant weakness, but for Nkem, silence was strategy. One afternoon, while wiping down the hallway on the top floor, he overheard two managers arguing inside the conference room. Their voices were low but clear enough for anyone paying attention. Their problem wasn't about office gossip or promotion. They were arguing because the company was sinking. Debts. Mismanagement. Missed opportunities. They were scared to report to the owner, a man who only visited once in a while and cared more about showing power than actually running the place well. Nkem didn't stand there to listen out of curiosity. He stood there because his mind was always searching for a door that life might open, even if just a crack. And in that moment, he sensed something shifting, something that didn't concern him today but might concern him in the future. He continued cleaning. He didn't let the managers know he heard anything. He never allowed people to know how much he observed. That was his strength. He knew how to stay quiet while gathering knowledge that others threw away like it was nothing. Later that week, during lunch break, he sat outside behind the building where nobody usually came. That was where he gave himself time to think clearly. His friend, Agona, who worked as a messenger in another office nearby, walked over to sit with him. "You look deep in thought again," Agona said with a smile. Nkem shrugged and told him he was fine, but Agona knew him well enough to sense that something was happening inside him. "Is it money?" Agona asked. "Or work stress? You know you can talk to me." Nkem shook his head. "Not exactly. I'm just thinking about my future." Agona laughed lightly. "You think too much. But thinking is good, sure. Just don't let life pass you by while you're thinking." Nkem smiled at that. His smile was gentle but carried an unspoken confidence. Deep down, he knew his life would never end inside a cleaning job. He could feel something shaping inside him even if he couldn't name it yet. A few days later, something unexpected happened. A meeting was called in the main hall, and almost the entire staff showed up. The atmosphere was heavy with tension. The owner of the company had arrived without warning. His name was Mr. Okafor, a tall man with sharp features and a voice that made people adjust their posture whenever he spoke. Nkem stood at the back, holding a mop, waiting for everyone to leave so he could finish cleaning. He didn't plan to listen, but the meeting collided with his duties again. Mr. Okafor stood before everyone and announced that the building was going up for sale. He didn't trust the managers anymore. He didn't want to run the company. He didn't want the building either. He wanted out. Gasps filled the room. People panicked. Some whispered. Some held their heads. Months of worries suddenly made sense. The company was sinking. And Nkem, standing at the back with his mop, felt something spark in his chest. Not excitement. Not fear. Something else. Something quiet but powerful. A seed that had been waiting for the right moment to wake up. He went home that day replaying every word he heard. The building would soon be in someone else's hands. The question rolling through his mind was simple, yet bold. Why not me? Why couldn't he be the one to own the building someday? He knew people would laugh if he said it out loud. A cleaner dreaming of owning a whole building. They would mock him. They would twist his dream into a joke. But he didn't tell them. He kept it inside him, where dreams stay protected until they grow strong enough to survive outside. Over the next few weeks, Nkem paid close attention to everything happening. Staff members complained. Some began looking for new jobs. Tension filled the air so badly that even the security man stopped gossiping. People were scared. But not Nkem. He noticed that the building had problems people didn't even see anymore because they were used to it. The broken tiles on the second floor. The faulty switch that sparked whenever someone turned it on. The painting that had started fading in the lobby. Everything that looked normal to others looked like opportunity to him. One evening, as he cleaned the empty corridor, he met the elderly caretaker of the building, Mama Uzo, who rarely talked but always watched things quietly. Nkem, my son, she said slowly, I see the way you observe everything. You work with your eyes open. Not everybody does that. He felt a strange warmth move through him. She wasn't praising his cleaning. She was acknowledging something deeper. Thank you, Ma, he said humbly. She nodded. People think opportunity comes with loud noise. But sometimes it comes quietly. Only people who are awake notice it. Her words stayed in his heart long after she walked away. Because he knew she wasn't just talking about opportunity. She was talking about him. And that was the beginning of the change he didn't even realize was already unfolding around him. Nkem's life didn't suddenly change the next day. Nothing dramatic like a lottery win or an unexpected inheritance happened. What changed was inside him. Every morning, he walked into the building carrying his mop and bucket, but this time he carried something else too. He carried vision. He started noticing not just the cracks in the walls or the peeling paint, but how those cracks could be fixed. How the floors could shine so bright that people who walked in would feel something different. He started thinking not like a cleaner, but like someone who could own the space, someone who could make it his. He began small. He asked Mama Uzo quietly about the building's history. She told him about every tenant, every problem that had been ignored for years, every business that had left because the offices weren't taken care of. Nkem listened without interrupting, writing everything in a small notebook he carried in his pocket. People in the office thought he was just an ordinary cleaner who liked taking notes about how to avoid making mistakes. But he was planning. One afternoon, he saw a young entrepreneur, Chijioke, struggling to set up a tiny shop on the ground floor. The man kept complaining to the building manager about leaks in the ceiling and broken doors. Nkem approached him quietly. I can help you with that, he said softly. Chijioke looked at him with mild surprise. Why would a cleaner know about these things? I know the building. I know what works and what doesn't. Trust me, Nkem said with a quiet confidence that made Chijioke pause. By the next week, Nkem had helped fix the door and even cleaned up the leak before it caused damage. Chijioke was amazed. He didn't just fix the problem, he explained how to prevent it from happening again. He didn't ask for money, just worked quietly and efficiently. Word began to spread slowly, first among the small tenants, then among the bigger offices. People started noticing that the cleaner didn't just clean. He understood the building. He understood people. He understood solutions. Nkem's schedule grew more demanding, but he welcomed it. Nights he spent at home with his little rented room, he pored over books borrowed from the library. Books on business, negotiation, real estate, leadership, and money. He didn't stop because the work seemed small. Every mop stroke, every corner swept, every broken tile he noticed became part of a larger puzzle he was solving in his mind. Then the managers began noticing something unusual. Nkem started appearing in their offices not as a cleaner, but as someone who offered suggestions. If a file cabinet was blocking a hallway, he suggested a better arrangement. If a tenant complained about electricity, he quietly explained how it could be fixed without spending much. Slowly, the managers started listening. They didn't know what to make of it. At first, they felt irritated that a cleaner dared to offer advice, but as Nkem continued, the advice worked. Problems were solved. Tenants were happier. Even Mr. Okafor's rare visits began to include a quick glance at Nkem, though he didn't speak to him yet. One day, a young woman named Ada, who worked in one of the offices on the third floor, stayed behind after everyone left. She was frustrated because a client meeting had been disrupted by a leaking ceiling. Nkem appeared quietly in the doorway with his bucket and mop, but he didn't start cleaning. He studied the ceiling for a long moment. "You need this fixed properly," he said calmly. "Not just a quick patch, or it will come back." Ada blinked at him. Who was this man? "I can show you a way to make sure it doesn't leak again," he said. She had no choice but to follow his instructions. The repair was done properly that evening, and the next day the client meeting went without a hitch. Ada was impressed and told everyone she could that the cleaner had saved the day. Nkem's reputation quietly grew. People whispered about him in hallways. They started bringing small requests to him directly instead of complaining to the management. He never boasted. He never demanded credit. He just solved problems quietly, and every small victory built his confidence, brick by brick. The turning point came one night when the building was empty. Nkem was mopping the top floor when he heard a sound that made him freeze. Footsteps. Soft, careful footsteps. He peered around the corner and saw a man sneaking through the hallway, trying to avoid the cameras. Nkem didn't panic. He had learned to observe first. The man was trying to steal from the office safe. Nkem waited until the man was close, then quietly followed him. He didn't shout. He didn't attack. He simply pulled out his phone and called the security team. Within minutes, the man was caught. The next day, the story spread quietly. Everyone praised the mysterious cleaner who had prevented a theft without making a scene. Even Mr. Okafor noticed and smiled faintly when he passed Nkem in the lobby. But Nkem didn't care about praise. He cared about vision. The building had value. People were losing money, opportunities were being ignored, and he could see it all. He began mapping out every floor in his notebook, noting what could be improved, what could be upgraded, how spaces could be rented to the right people, how revenue could increase. Every idea was a small step toward the larger dream he didn't yet announce even to himself. He also started connecting with people outside the building. Small suppliers, electricians, painters, interior decorators, even small business owners who rented other offices nearby. He asked questions, learned prices, understood market trends. He was building knowledge quietly while the staff inside the building remained unaware that the cleaner they overlooked was becoming unstoppable. One evening, while sitting on the stairwell with his notebook, Mama Uzo appeared. She handed him a small packet. "Open it," she said. Inside were old blueprints of the building, showing the original design, hidden spaces, and weak points that could be converted into profitable areas. Nkem's heart raced. She had kept these for years, waiting for someone like him. With the blueprints in hand, he felt a surge of certainty. It was no longer a dream in the dark corners of his mind. It was becoming a plan with steps, deadlines, and strategies. He would start small, renovate unnoticed areas, improve the tenant's experience, and save money. Then, when the right moment came, he would be ready. Nkem worked late that night, marking every corner, every room, every potential space that could generate income. The mop, bucket, and cleaning cloth were still by his side, but his mind was no longer on cleaning. It was on building a future that seemed impossible to everyone else, but not to him. And deep down, he knew the first real opportunity would not just be about fixing tiles or preventing theft. It would be about convincing someone that a cleaner could think like a businessman, a strategist, a visionary. And he would do it quietly, methodically, until nobody could ignore him anymore. By the time the next month rolled in, Nkem's life inside the building had changed without anyone really noticing. To the outside world, He was still the quiet cleaner who moved through the hallways with his mop and bucket. But inside, he had transformed. Every day he woke before dawn in his small rented room in Enugu, took a quick breakfast of pap and akara, and thought through the tasks ahead. He imagined himself walking through the building not as a cleaner, but as someone who owned it, who decided its fate. He started observing the tenants more closely, not in a nosy way, but in a way that let him see patterns. The marketing company on the fourth floor wasted office space with old furniture that no one touched. The small law firm on the second floor didn't have proper security cameras. The tiny cafe near the lobby had no seating plan, causing constant congestion at lunch hours. Every inefficiency was a clue, every frustration an opportunity. One morning, while polishing the lobby floor, he noticed Mr. Okafor arriving earlier than usual. The man's eyes scanned the hall, his fingers drumming on his phone. Nkem continued working, keeping his head down, but he couldn't help noticing the tension radiating from the owner. Later, in hushed whispers among the staff, it became clear that the company was on the verge of selling not only the building but also the business that ran inside it. Nkem didn't panic. Instead, he began thinking about how to position himself. Owning the building wasn't just a dream anymore. It was a possibility that could be shaped if he acted carefully. He began taking more decisive steps. First, he talked quietly to the tenants who seemed frustrated or neglected. "I noticed the door to your office leaks whenever it rains," he said to one woman who ran a small import-export business. "If you like, I can show you how to fix it properly." At first, she laughed. A cleaner fixing doors. But he did it carefully, using tools he borrowed, and explained to her why the small adjustment mattered. Word spread. Soon, several tenants began coming to him directly instead of the management. They paid him small sums for minor fixes, but what Nkem valued more than money was trust. He also began keeping detailed notes of every tenant's lease, their complaints, their requests, their potential for growth. Some spaces could be rented for higher prices, he realized. Some offices could be combined or repurposed. Every observation, every repair, every suggestion he made quietly increased the value of the building and his knowledge about it. One evening, after everyone left, Nkem found a small group of rodents causing trouble near the kitchen of a tenant's office. Instead of scaring them away with a trap, he studied the pattern. He realized there was a gap in the building's foundation that no one had noticed. That small insight saved the tenant hundreds of naira in potential food losses and structural damage. He patched it quietly and made a note in his notebook. Mema Uzo noticed this meticulousness. She had always seen promise in him, but now it was undeniable. She approached him one late night as he rested on the stairwell. "You're thinking too far ahead for most people to understand," she said softly. "But that is what makes you different. Keep going." Nkem nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He didn't say it, but he felt ready. Not to announce anything yet, not to act openly, but ready to take the first real steps toward something that could change his life forever. He began creating a plan that involved more than repairs. He started approaching small suppliers in the city, negotiating prices for materials he might need. He studied building codes, regulations, and even ways to secure small loans or investors without raising suspicion. Every night, he stayed awake with his small lamp, marking timelines, imagining every scenario, testing the feasibility of every idea. Then came the day when opportunity knocked unexpectedly. A well-dressed businessman arrived at the building looking for office space. He had heard rumors that the owner might sell, and he wanted to inspect the place. Nkem observed quietly from the hallway, noting how the man's eyes wandered over every floor, every corner, every inconvenience. Later, when the businessman complained about the outdated elevators and the faulty air conditioning, Nkem spoke up. He suggested practical solutions to reduce costs and maximize space efficiency. The businessman was shocked. A cleaner offering such insights. He asked Nkem if he had any experience in real estate or management. Nkem only smiled and said he observed. By the end of the week, The businessman returned not to complain, but to seek advice on renting multiple floors. He trusted the cleaner more than the management, more than anyone else. It was a small victory, but a monumental one in Nkem's mind. He began to see how influence could be built quietly, without noise, without demands, just by understanding people and solving their problems. Nkem also started noticing the managers were more attentive to him now. Some approached him under the guise of casual conversation, asking for his opinion. Others tried to bribe him to overlook small issues. He politely declined, knowing every decision mattered in his larger plan. Every day, his mind worked like a strategist mapping territories before battle. But it wasn't all smooth. There were moments of discouragement. One afternoon, a tenant threatened to report him to management for overstepping. Another time, a pipe burst in the restroom he was cleaning, causing chaos and embarrassment. Yet, even in these moments, Nkem learned. Every mistake, every accusation, every challenge became fuel. He didn't cry over small setbacks. He analyzed, adapted, and moved forward. Weeks turned into months. By now, tenants started requesting him personally for small improvements. He became the invisible glue holding the building together, the quiet problem solver no one could ignore. Tenants began to respect him not just for his work but for his insight, his ability to predict problems before they happened. One night, while reviewing his notebook filled with observations, plans, and strategies, Nkem felt a strange sense of clarity. Every small action he had taken, the repairs, the advice, the quiet listening, the careful learning, had built something bigger than himself. He could feel it, a momentum so strong it was almost physical. He thought about the day Mr. Okafor announced he was selling. The seed planted in him that day had grown into something alive, something tangible. And Nkem knew, deep down, that the moment to act was approaching. The building could be his if he played his cards right, if he moved quietly but decisively, and if he waited for the perfect timing to reveal the vision that had been building silently inside him for months. He closed his notebook and looked around the empty hallway. The moonlight from the windows touched the polished floor, reflecting the quiet determination in his eyes. This was only the beginning. The world outside still saw a cleaner. But inside, Nkem was already building an empire in his mind, step by careful step, moment by moment, preparing for the day when silence would give way to power. And that day, he knew, would come sooner than anyone imagined. Life in the building continued its quiet rhythm, but for Nkem, every movement and sound became part of a bigger picture. He no longer moved through the corridors simply to clean. He moved through them as if mapping every angle, every opportunity. The elevators that groaned when too many people rode at once, the lights that flickered in the afternoon heat, the windows that let in too much sun and left the rooms hot, all of it was data. Every complaint from tenants, every request, every moment of chaos became part of a mental map that he stored carefully. One afternoon, Nkem noticed a delivery man struggling to carry a large package to a small office on the top floor. Instead of rushing past, he stepped in, helping to carry the load. The small gesture seemed trivial to the staff around him, but Nkem knew better. Relationships were quietly built through small, unnoticed acts of service. That night, he made a note in his notebook: every person you help, every problem you solve, becomes a thread you can weave into your future. Over time, he developed a routine that went far beyond cleaning. He began studying the tenants' businesses, understanding their strengths and weaknesses. He noticed patterns in cash flow, in client behavior, in how they organized or failed to organize their offices. He even started helping some of them with advice on small improvements that increased efficiency and reduced costs. At first, people were skeptical. Why would a cleaner know so much? But slowly, they began to see the value in his insights. One evening, while the building was almost empty, he noticed a group of contractors working on the basement area for repairs. He approached them quietly, not to supervise, but to understand. He asked questions about materials, pricing, and scheduling. He took notes. By the time they left, Nkem had a complete understanding of what could be done to improve the building cheaply but effectively. He also learned how contractors thought, what motivated them, and where their weaknesses were. Knowledge was power, and Nkem was quietly accumulating it. Then came a turning point that would change everything. Mr. Okafor, the building owner, announced that he was seriously considering selling. He wanted to move abroad and was frustrated by management failures and declining profits. The news spread like fire through the offices. Tenants panicked, staff whispered, and managers scrambled to make the building appear more valuable than it was. Nkem, however, felt a strange calm. He had been preparing for this moment silently, steadily, like someone planting seeds all year for a harvest they know will come. He began drafting a plan, not a simple dream, but a detailed strategy that could turn the opportunity into reality. He started small, approaching tenants one by one. He asked them what they valued most in the building, what they hated, and what they would pay more for if improvements were made. He took careful notes. With each conversation, he learned about human behavior, fear, and desire. Every piece of information was fuel for his plan. He also began approaching the contractors more seriously. He negotiated prices for potential renovations, learning how to save money without sacrificing quality. By the end of the month, he had a list of improvements that could instantly increase the building's value, all prepared in a way that would impress Mr. Okafor if presented correctly. Then, Nkem did something bold. He approached a small local bank to inquire about a loan. He didn't ask for a large sum, just enough to make initial improvements. He spoke carefully, presenting his plan with confidence and clarity. The bank manager was skeptical at first, but Nkem's knowledge and preparation impressed him. By the next week, he had approval for a modest loan that could cover renovations and improvements. With the loan secured, Nkem began working behind the scenes. He organized a small team of trusted helpers, including Agona, his friend, and a few others who had skills in construction, plumbing, and painting. They worked quietly at night, making repairs, upgrading offices, and improving facilities without drawing attention. Tenants began noticing the changes. The elevators ran smoother, the restrooms were cleaner and more functional, the air conditioning worked more efficiently, and small inconveniences disappeared. People started asking who was responsible. Nkem remained quiet, letting the improvements speak for themselves. His influence grew steadily. Tenants trusted him, managers respected him, and even Mr. Okafor began noticing the subtle changes. The building felt alive in a way it hadn't before. Everyone assumed some outside consultant or new management team had been hired. No one guessed it was the cleaner who had orchestrated the entire transformation. Meanwhile, Nkem studied Mr. Okafor. He observed his moods, his decisions, his frustrations. He understood what the owner wanted, a buyer who could take care of the building, increase profits, and maintain order without constant oversight. Nkem knew he could be that person, but he needed to be strategic. One night, he stayed late, walking through the entire building floor by floor. He stopped at the rooftop, looking out at the city lights stretching endlessly before him. He imagined the building under his control, tenants satisfied, profits increasing, and the space becoming a hub of opportunity rather than chaos. The vision burned bright in his mind, sharper than any dream he had ever had. The next day, he began building alliances quietly. He spoke to tenants individually, ensuring they would support a buyer who had proven knowledge and care. He spoke to the managers in private, offering solutions that would make their work easier if he were to take a larger role in managing the property. Every conversation was calculated, every relationship strengthened. By the end of the month, Nkem had prepared something remarkable. He had a full dossier ready for Mr. Okafor, detailed notes on tenant satisfaction, renovation costs, potential revenue increase, management solutions, and even a proposal for taking over the building through purchase or partnership. Every page was backed by months of careful observation, quiet action, and relentless preparation. And Nkem knew that when the time came to present his plan, it would not be as a cleaner asking for a chance. It would be as a strategist, a problem solver, a visionary who had already demonstrated capability beyond his title. That night, he sat on the top floor with his notebook, the city lights shimmering below. Mima Uzo appeared quietly, handing him a small cup of tea. "You are ready now," she said softly. "Everything you did, every step, every moment of patience, has led you to this point. Trust yourself." Nkem sipped the tea, feeling warmth spread through him. He had waited, prepared, and acted quietly. The moment of change was near. And when it arrived, no one, not the tenants, not the managers, not even Mr. Okafor, would see it coming until it was already real. He returned to his small room that night with a heart steady and a mind sharp. The mop and bucket remained by the door, silent witnesses to the life that was transforming behind the scenes. The cleaner was no longer just a cleaner. The cleaner was becoming the owner in every sense, prepared for the moment when the world would have no choice but to see him as more than he appeared. The day finally came when Nkem would no longer be just a shadow in the hallways. It began like any other morning. He arrived early, as usual, carrying his mop and bucket, walking through the lobby with the quiet confidence that had been building for months. Staff and tenants barely looked at him. To them, he was still the cleaner who kept the floors polished and the windows shining. But inside, he carried something far heavier than a bucket. He carried months of preparation, knowledge, strategy, and silent victories. The first step was subtle. He had arranged a private meeting with Mr. Okafor under the pretext of discussing minor improvements. The owner arrived, slightly impatient, expecting routine conversation. Nkem waited patiently while Mr. Okafor settled into the leather chair in his office, papers scattered on the desk. "Sir," he began quietly, "I've been observing the building and the tenants for some time. I've prepared some ideas that could increase revenue, improve tenant satisfaction, and make your life easier if you're planning to sell or step back." Mr. Okafor raised an eyebrow. "A cleaner presenting a business plan?" He leaned back and waited, curiosity replacing skepticism for the first time. Nkem began to outline everything: the renovations completed quietly over the last months, the potential revenue from better leasing, the improved tenant relationships, and the cost-saving strategies he had developed. He spoke clearly, without arrogance, without a hint of desperation. Each word was backed by evidence he had gathered patiently, methodically, silently. By the end of the presentation, Mr. Okafor was silent for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. "You've done all of this quietly," he said. "You've improved the building without asking for recognition. You've observed, learned, acted. Most people would never see the opportunity in front of them. Most people would just complain. You've done more than most managers I've had." Nkem nodded quietly. He didn't boast. The mop in his hand reminded him where he started and how far he had come. The next step was negotiating ownership. Mr. Okafor was ready to sell, but he wanted someone capable, someone who understood the building and could maintain it properly. Nkem presented a financial plan, showing how he could acquire the building with savings, small loans, and a promise to improve its value further. He detailed every renovation, every improvement, every tenant relationship, and every strategy for growth. The negotiations were careful. Mr. Okafor tested him, asked questions, challenged him. Nkem answered with precision, calm, and confidence. He never stumbled. Every answer was grounded in months of observation and preparation. By the end of the week, the deal was done. Nkem, the quiet cleaner who had once walked unnoticed through the lobby, became the owner of the building. The news spread slowly at first. Tenants were shocked. Managers were stunned. Some laughed in disbelief. How could a cleaner become the owner? But then they saw the evidence. The building ran smoother than ever. Tenants were happier, the offices were improved, the previously overlooked problems had vanished. Nkem's work spoke louder than anyone's skepticism. With ownership came responsibility. Nkem moved quickly, yet carefully. He retained the staff, promoting those who had proven loyalty and skill. He continued to solve problems quietly, always observing, always learning. He worked with contractors to make additional improvements, converting neglected spaces into profitable offices, improving utilities, and upgrading amenities. He also thought about the people who had doubted him. Not out of revenge, but as lessons. He met with managers who had once mocked him and offered guidance on how to run departments efficiently. Some accepted and grew under his mentorship, others left quietly, unable to adjust to a leader who had risen from the bottom. One afternoon, he stood in the lobby, watching tenants walk through the doors. He noticed how they carried themselves differently now. They respected the building, the staff, and, most importantly, the quiet man who had become the owner. The mop and bucket were no longer in his hands, but he kept them in his office, a reminder of where he started, the silent determination that had carried him here. He also remembered Mama Uzo's words. "You are ready now. Everything you did, every step, every moment of patience, has led you to this point. Trust yourself." Nkem did trust himself. More than that, he trusted the process. He had learned that success was never sudden. It was built quietly, patiently, step by step, observation by observation, act by act. The building was not just a structure of concrete and steel. It was a symbol of his vision, his resilience, and his ability to see opportunity where others saw routine. Over time, he expanded his influence. He began purchasing other properties, reinvesting profits, and mentoring young people who reminded him of himself. He became a figure of inspiration not because he shouted his achievements but because people saw the evidence of them every day. Nkem often walked the halls late at night, after tenants had left, quietly checking each floor, each office, each detail. The city lights stretched before him, reflecting in the windows. He thought about the journey from the day he first walked in with a mop and bucket to this moment of ownership, respect, and quiet power. And he knew one truth above all: dreams are not built in moments of applause. They are built in silence, in patience, in the unseen work done when nobody is looking. The cleaner who had walked unnoticed through hallways had become the owner of the entire building, not through luck, but through vision, preparation, and relentless determination. The building thrived under his care, tenants prospered, and even the city seemed to take notice of the subtle energy he had brought into the space. Nkem had turned his life completely, transforming the impossible into reality. As he looked out from the rooftop, feeling the breeze on his face and the city alive below, he allowed himself a quiet smile. He had learned the streets, the people, the opportunities. He had moved silently, observed carefully, and acted wisely. By the time others sought control, he was already in command. The mop and bucket remained in his office, silent witnesses of a journey that began with nothing but determination and a refusal to be invisible. Nkem, once a cleaner, now owned not only the building but the proof that vision, patience, and relentless effort could turn any life around. He walked down the stairs to check on the tenants one last time before leaving the building for the night, knowing tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new victories. But tonight, he allowed himself to savor the quiet triumph of a dream realized, a journey completed, and a life transformed. And in that quiet night, the man who had once been invisible finally understood the truth of power. It is never given, it is quietly earned. Thank you for staying with us through this incredible journey of Nkem, the cleaner who became the owner of the entire building. His story reminds us that patience, vision, and relentless determination can turn the impossible into reality. If this story inspired you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more amazing tales that show how courage and persistence can change lives. We'd love to hear from you. Tell us in the comments the country you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Your stories and engagement keep us going and inspire us to bring even more captivating stories right to your screen. Stay tuned, stay inspired, and remember, sometimes the quietest people have the loudest impact.